Hi, my name is Deb from DG Reads, and this is my furry sidekick Kylie, and we're here today to kick off a new mushroomy vlog. The idea for this vlog came about when the first finalist was announced for this year's self-published fantasy blog-off, or SPFBO, and that book was Mushroom Blues by Adrienne M. Gibson. And the cover of this one is full of mushrooms. I really like the cover, and I really am intrigued by the idea of a mushroom-based fantasy world, which is what this book entails. And I started thinking about the fact that mushrooms are kind of an in thing at the moment. I did have quite a few books that I've recently read on my shelves with mushrooms, and some I still needed to get to. So I put together a little bit of a TBR, and hopefully I can find some fun things along the way tied in with the mushroom theme. So in addition to, of course, picking up the Mushroom Blues finalist for SPFBO, I also have Head Like a Hole by Andrew Van Wey. This is a horror book that's been on my want to read for quite a while, and it keeps catching my eye because that cover full of horrors and mushrooms and who knows what all else going on here. I don't know a lot going into this one. I think it's one that I want to go in relatively blind, especially with that strange of a cover. But we're dealing with something that happened in the 90s. I think we're dealing in multiple timelines. There sounds like there's a mystery element to it, possibly a dark academia element to it, and I'm very intrigued. Something that's very new to my shelves is Don't Let the Forest In. This one just came out. It's by C.G. Drews. This is a YA horror, and if you look really closely, there are these mushroom type things on the edges of the cover, and I'm counting that because this is one that I pre-ordered, and I need to get better at picking up my pre-orders when they come in. This one is set at a boarding school, as I understand it, surrounded by forests. There's something menacing within those forests, and the boy that we're following goes out into the forest with a friend. He sees a friend battling magical creatures, I think, and it definitely caught my attention. When I was trying to figure out if I had any mushroom books on my shelves that I was forgetting, one that I found on a couple of mushroomy lists was Rouge. And I did not think of this as being a mushroom because it's very definitely a rose, but it's a weird looking rose. And if you look at it upside down, it definitely kind of looks mushroomy. I don't know if this really counts or not, but it is a book that's been on my shelf for quite a while and one that I need to get to. I've heard very mixed things about this. I really enjoyed Bunny by Mona Awad, so I'm going in with high hopes, but tempered hopes. So this one, as I understand it, is about beauty industry. We're following a woman who I think has lost her mother, and she gets dragged into kind of a beauty cult almost, maybe? I'm not entirely sure, but I will find out. And then lastly, one that certainly has plenty of mushrooms on the cover is a special edition of In the Roses of Pyria, and this is by Anna Burke. It is a special edition I received from Twisted Retreat, and this particular cover certainly is stunning and full of mushrooms. We've got mushrooms on the end papers, on the naked hardcover, on the reverse dust jacket. This book definitely has mushrooms. This is one I've been a little bit wary of, but I need the push to pick it up. It's on my TBR also for the Horror Bingo Challenge because it is a book out of my comfort zone in the sense that it is a romance mixed with dark academia and horror, but the romance is the part that kind of pushes it a little bit outside of my comfort zone. This one says it is a queer dark fantasy romance with vampires and fungal fae and many other things, so I am intrigued to check this one out. So this is my little mushroom TBR, and I am looking forward to diving in, figuring out what the mushrooms are in each of these, assuming there are mushrooms in each of these, and what else I can get up to in the space of the next week or so that it takes me to get through these books. And I will be back once I've started reading and give you some initial thoughts. Kylie decided she wanted to be part of an update. You like mushrooms? Yeah? She's indifferent. She's indifferent to mushrooms. But I like mushrooms. Speaking of reading about mushrooms, I do have an update for you. And you're heavy, so I think I'm going to put you down. I have started Mushroom Blues and I'm about at the 40 or a little past 40% mark. I figured it was a good time to give you an update. Probably going to be some noise because me holding her for a couple seconds didn't quite expend the energy she's got to run around right now. We'll see. As someone who really likes a good theme and embracing a theme to whatever extent you possibly can, I really appreciated the fact that the author included the dedication in here to thank his family, but in mushroom terms. So that was a lot of fun to open the book up. I also really did appreciate that the author includes a glossary at the front of different mushroom terms and also some of the language that is used in the book. I think the book is very good about kind of giving translations in the context of the actual narrative where people are using this language that would be foreign to us. But I also appreciate having that kind of at the beginning to refer back to if I need to. As the author calls it, the fungal verse glossary. In this book, we're following a human detective who is working in what she considers to be kind of a punishment setting, something that her ex has had control over assigning her to, and she's really unhappy with this. The case that she's on is a mutilated child, but this isn't a human child. This is a child that is a fungal child, and this means that they have a human face, but like they have a mushroom cap on top of their head, or they would if it hadn't been removed brutally by whoever dismembered this poor child. And these fungal people put out spores, which is something she's afraid of, and they are just so different to her, and she is very biased against them. We are in her head, and her hatred towards all of these people from this other people group is a lot to deal with. The police brutality against them and her just racism, for lack of a better term. I'm not sure if that applies when it's a fungal people versus a human, but you get my gist. I think as we're going, she is having to work with an officer who is one of these people, and he is the only one who is not human on the police force. So I think this is something that's going to open her eyes more, that's going to become a place for growth for her character arc, or at least that's what I'm hoping to get out of this story. It's a really interesting world. It's kind of a remnants after war, and there's some really good quotes and images talking about the war and talking about the brutality of war and what has and hasn't been left behind from that. And I think there's a lot of interesting elements. I'm all in for fantasy mixed with mystery, and that's kind of what we're getting in here, and I'm interested to see where it is going. It's not necessarily so far something I'm necessarily wanting to just sit and binge and read in a single sitting. Like I said, some of the thoughts in her head, and even though they're not slurs that we would use towards someone, calling someone a gilly or calling someone a button and things that are just words to us in our reality, you can just tell from the way they're being used that they would be hurtful to this people group here. So it's interesting the way the author has pulled this off, and I am very intrigued to keep going and see where this goes. So I will check back in once I've finished. I have finished Mushroom Blues and have some mixed thoughts on this one. I think the world was just really cool. I think the author used something that we're familiar with in a very different way, and I liked that. I liked how dedicated they were to the mushroom theme. The fact that this world is basically fungal almost entirely. Most of the people are, and I think it was used in a way to really highlight a lot of different themes between the fact that this is a post-war world and in recovery, and there are some great lines in there about that. It's also looking at abuse of children, so definitely check trigger warnings, both human and fungal. There's child-related triggers going on in here. The language of the book, with the heavy reliance on mushroom terms, did get a little repetitive, I think, at times. Things get brought up a lot that maybe was a little bit overboard, and trust me, I do enjoy embracing a theme, so I get it. But I think as a reader and just just binge reading this. I read this basically over the course of 2 days. It did get a little bit on the repetitive side. I think the plot was well done. I think the pacing was well done. And I like the main character and the character arc that she goes on and the expansion of her mind. Not everything turns out perfectly in the end. There are still a little bit of innate prejudices within herself, I would say, but it's an evolving process. Certainly the other humans on the force who aren't as intimately involved in this case and pursuing these criminals and what they're doing to people like our victim, I think haven't had that growing experience, and you can still see that to the very end. So I think overall this was a 3.5 read for me. I had a good time with it. I'm glad I picked it up. It's certainly the most mushroomy of mushroom books that I'm going to get to in the space of this vlog, but I am very motivated to go ahead and start my next book. I'm gonna make myself some tea and sit with Kylie and do a little bit more reading this evening and see how it goes. I'll be back once I have a new update for you. Hello, I am here with some mushroom updates. So first off, a tasty update. We just recently got a Shake Shack put in relatively near my house, and it's a drive-through one. So I noticed that they had a shroom burger, and in particular they have a black truffle line of their burgers and shroom burgers and fries. So Kylie and I hopped in the car last night and decided it was a good night for takeout, and we went to check out the Shake Shack, and I got the black truffle shroom burger, which was really tasty. It's like a mushroom that's stuffed with 2 different types of cheeses and then breaded and deep fried and then with a black truffle sauce on it, and that was really tasty. I went with plain fries, which I wound up kind of regretting. They were just kind of okay. They weren't the hottest and freshest by the time I got them home in particular, but I would definitely have that burger, or not burger, that mushroom vegetarian burger again, because that was really tasty. So I'm glad this vlog gave me a really good excuse to go buy myself a nice mushroom burger. But I also have a reading update for you, and that's that I am halfway through Don't Let the Forest In. Now, this is a cover that I wasn't entirely sure had enough mushrooms to really justify calling it a mushroomy cover, but it does have mushrooms in the story as well, so I think it validates this being very mushroomy along the edges here, and I think it counts. So in this one, we're following Andrew, who is a high school student at a boarding school, and he is just coming back to school, basically where the story opens, after a summer break. Over the summer, his best friend Thomas broke his phone, or more appropriately, you would say his father broke his phone, and so they've been out of touch for the summer, and Andrew's borderline obsessed with this friend. It's a little bit of a mix of him being his best friend and also his love interest. Andrew's not sure if he wants it just to be friendship or if he wants to be kissing his friend. There's a little bit of a question mark there. Andrew's a very socially awkward individual. He doesn't have very many friends. He rooms with and is best friends with Thomas. His twin sister goes to the school as well, and their relationship is relatively okay, but he is picked on. He's done some weird things that have drawn attention to him, and he's just not the best at relating to other people or even to himself. He's just very awkward in that way. And as the book opens, Thomas arrives very disheveled. He seems to have some blood on him, and then the police show up because his parents are missing and there was blood left behind. And there's a lot of questions to this as to what's been going on. Andrew starts questioning things with Thomas, and that creates some tension in their relationship. As we know from the synopsis, we are finding out that Thomas's art is part of the problem or part of what's going on here, and that there are monsters that are somehow related to his art. And I think the atmosphere in here has been very good. It's been dark, it's been dismal. I think the author's doing a good job of portraying our main character and his anxieties and his attempts at being a friend, but also his failures at being a friend at times. And I'm really interested to see where this is actually heading and where it's going. So I will keep going on with this one and check back in once I finished it. I'm back because I have now finished up Don't Let the Forest In and have some final thoughts for you. I overall like this. I think the author did atmosphere and did weirdness and twistiness really well in here. There were some guesses that I made early-ish on that proved out to be true, but I definitely was questioning things along the way and questioning what direction things will turn. This does have some significant trigger warnings, so if I haven't already mentioned that, I feel like I need to, and definitely recommend looking those up. We've got issues of self-harm, we've got issues of grief and loss and darkness and bloodiness and goriness. We've got some very haunted feelings in here as well. I did really feel for our main character, Andrew, and as a reader, we're in his head and only seeing what he knows and what he can kind of let us in on. I think the author did really well at letting us see some of the things going on outside that he didn't understand and letting us in on some secrets earlier on and giving us clues as to what was really going on earlier on in the story than he clued into it, and I think that was well done. I did also like the inclusion. These kind of darker pages along the way are like little fairy tale, kind of dark fairy tale type stories that Andrew, is writing and Thomas is illustrating, and I like that kind of dark fairy tale feel to the book as well. Overall, this winds up getting a very strong 4 stars for me, and not super mushroomy, but it did have some mushrooms and some disturbing imagery related to that, so definitely fit the theme. I am back with a couple of mushroomy updates for you, and starting with the non-reading, I bought myself a little something fun to go with the theme, and that is a mess. But I've got a hoop, I've got some thread, and a couple of different mushroomy little cross-stitch kits, and I've been wanting to do some cross-stitching, but I took on a really big project and did not see it through. The thread got too tangled and I got frustrated and it just didn't happen, so I figured maybe doing a couple of cute little ones would satisfy the itch while also not taking too much time away from the fact that I've got plenty of other projects and crocheting and things to be doing. So I'm going to go ahead and get started on this, probably listening to an audiobook this morning after my coffee. And then I have also been reading, but before I get into this, I did want to point out this super cute bookmark. This is a Patreon bookmark that Lexie from Books with Lexie put out, just perfectly timed for this mushroom vlog, so thank you to Lexie for that. And then I am at the end of part 2 in Rouge, which puts me around the 45% mark, and I'm not sure what I'm thinking about this. It's weird, and I like the kind of atmosphere of it and the weirdness. I'm finding it a bit slow in places, though. We are following Belle, who has recently just lost her mother, and their relationship was a little bit difficult at times, a little bit strained. Belle remembers being not the prettiest of kids, and her mother was always gorgeous, and she watched her mother with a bit of envy. Her mother was much more obsessed with beauty and with mirrors and the like. Now that she's grown up and moved away, Belle is obsessed with beauty as well. Her beauty regimen is over the top ridiculous. The amount of peels and slimes and serums and moisturizers that she applies to her face day and night, and her obsessive watching of beauty videos on YouTube from one particular creator, and all of this makes her look much more gorgeous, but it's a lot, and it's definitely over the top. At her mother's kind of funeral party, there's a mysterious woman in red, and the things she says don't really make sense, but they kind of get into Belle's head and keep following Belle around in various ways. And she winds up hearing about this transformative spa, and this is something that she almost is compelled to check out. She's supposed to be leaving in a few days. She's supposed to be wrapping up her mother's estate and dealing with her mother's debt and everything else, and then she's supposed to be going back to Canada, back to her home, back to a very different place. And still she's getting obsessed with this whole spa idea, with the weird characters that are involved with that, and with kind of trying to figure out how this all ties into her mother and her mother's death and what happened kind of toward the end of her mother's life. So I'm not sure. I'm not sure at all how I am feeling about this. It's intriguing. It's still keeping my attention. I have read some of it physically. I've read some of it on audio, and both are good. Both are interesting me. So I am going to keep going, and maybe by the end I will have more actual thoughts. Maybe. I'm back with some mushroom updates for you. And to start with, I finished Rouge. And even though I did find this in a couple of places when I was Googling mushroom covers, I think this was a miss. It definitely has more than just a rose going on here, but I don't think to be a mushroom. Oh, it does actually look like one when you flip it over. So anyway, that's beside the point. The book itself didn't wow me. I think there were elements here that I liked. I liked the weirdness of it. I liked the kind of way she generates this into a fever dream of a book. But for that type of book, I feel like this was too long. And I think if it had been much shorter and got to the point faster, I think I would have liked it more. I do think the writing was good. I think that our main character was well portrayed in terms of everything she was going through and her addictions and her memories being fuzzy and her relationship with her mother being troubled. I think a lot of that was done well, but in the end I was just kind of bored with this in places, and that's unfortunate. So I'm giving it a 3.5, rounded to 3 maybe, but unfortunately this wasn't a win, but it's a book that I got off my shelf thanks to the vlog. So that's, I guess, a win in itself. And then I also started my next mushroom book. And that is In the Roses of Pyrea. And this is first book in a series, which I didn't realize when I initially picked it up, but it is labeled that way. I haven't looked to see if the next one is out. And this one, with the special edition at least, definitely has a mushroom theme going on with the cover. In this one, we're following Clara, and she's an archivist. She has been offered a job where she has to sign this really, really heavy-duty NDA and has to basically give her life over to this job in a lot of ways. But the work that she's doing, she's archiving things, she's reading things that no one else really has ever read before. They're believed to not exist or to have been destroyed in a lot of cases, and she's kind of hooked on the work. She hasn't had much interaction or any interaction with her boss up until we get to maybe like the 30% mark of the book, and then she starts to learn a little bit more about the job she's doing and about what this kind of means, and it goes to some darker places. I'm having some mixed thoughts on this one. It is a book that I initially put on my TBR when it comes to the horror bingo board from Sarah at Wicked Reading as a book out of my comfort zone, because it is a blend of romance and fantasy and horror. And so far the romance has really kind of been center stage. It does have dark academia vibes, which I really like, but her and her boss's assistant are getting into a relationship with each other, even though they are not really 100% able to be fully honest with each other. And that kind of has a secrecy to it in some ways, and that's been a big part of it. Plus, we're getting some of the writings or the relationships from the writings that she's archiving as well. So now that I'm at the halfway point, I think I'm at 55%, we are getting some of the darker elements becoming more prominent. So I'm hoping to wind up enjoying this more as I get into the second half and see how it goes from there. But so far I'm kind of reserving judgment. It's not by any means a bad book. It maybe isn't hitting as a me book, but I am going to keep reading and see how it goes from here. I've now finished In the Roses of Pyrea. I've been listening to this on audio, so I should know how to pronounce that, but no, I don't. Anyway, this just never quite clicked in for me. I think it was very much romance focused over any sort of super interesting plot. The kind of dark academia vibes I liked, some of that and what they were studying, the idea of these documents from the way back, which hinted at relationships that kind of mirrored the present day relationship. I think there was some interesting stuff there, but the main character and the relationship she was in never really clicked for me. The relationship goes very fast, and I'm much more, if I'm gonna go for a romance, I want more slow burn intention, and that was lacking in here for me. So overall, this one got a 2.5. Not a new favorite, but glad that I finally got to it off my shelf and checked it off on my TBR. I'm back with initial thoughts for my final mushroom book, and that is Head Like a Hole by Andrew Van Way. And this one, I really went in with very little knowledge as to what we're getting, and I think that was a good choice with this one because it's weird. It's got me questioning what's going on, and all of that's going really well for me so far. I really like the printing on this. Also has some like extra elements. It's got some darker pages in here, and that also has me curious how that exactly is tying into it. But I am at the halfway point now, and I'm having a good time. I'm flying through it pretty quickly. This is also on KU, so I was able to pick up the audiobook from Audible using the Whisper Sphinx pricing. So I was able to pick that up, and I've been going back and forth between reading it physically and listening to the audio when I need to. I am planning to make some mushroom ravioli to kind of finish off the food portion of the vlog theme, but this book. So we start with a podcaster approaching a woman named Megan and basically digging something up from her past that she has put away in her memory, it sounds like, and kind of blindsiding her into an interview. And from there, we move on to her kind of telling this story of a woman named Oksana and what happened when they were at boarding school. It's very vague, so I'm going to leave it vague as well. Of course, I found out a little bit more by the halfway point, but it's still a lot of vagueness. The other thing we get at the beginning is a man who is doing some crabbing, and he pulls out a crab pot, and there's a head inside, except this head isn't a dead head. It's a head that opens its eyes and can kind of communicate with him and chomp down on his fingers, and there's weird stuff going on with that, and I don't know how all of this is going to tie together. In the present day, the more present day I guess I would say, we've got Megan, and she's kind of starting to reconnect with some of her old friends from boarding school. We know that her parents died in a fire. We know her grandmother blames her for that. We know that she spent a good amount of time in the hospital following some sort of accident, and she has permanent scars from that, both mentally and literally on her face. So there's a lot of kind of weirdness going on in here. The atmosphere is really good. We're getting some school settings, so a little bit of dark academia going on in here. And yeah, it's a hard one to wrap my head around, but I am really enjoying it. So I'm eager to keep going, and we'll be back with some final thoughts. I'm back with my final thoughts on my final book for the mushroom vlog, and I did sit down with my ravioli last night, which was a mushroom ravioli with a creamy tomato sauce, which turned out quite well from HelloFresh, and I finished up Head Like a Hole. And I really had a good time with this. I think it was the perfect amount of weirdness and horror, a lot of body horror going on in this one, maybe medical horror almost, but it definitely took some dark, twisty turns. And I did guess some of them with the way our timelines were fitting together, but there were definitely surprises going on as well in the way that this kind of went a really weird undead kind of direction. I thought that the timelines were really woven together quite well. I liked the concepts of the timelines, the way the 90s really kind of felt like the 90s when we were there, and the way our podcaster was trying to pull one over on our main character, but really our main character was pulling things over on herself and on her friends and potentially on this podcaster. It was just a really good, fun time, and one that I would recommend. This wound up being just a really fun kind of theme to explore. Definitely got some culinary mushroom ideas flowing mushrooming for me, and I have a few more mushroom recipes I didn't even get to in the space of this vlog that I still want to get to. And we got Kylie a new mushroom bandana. We just had a good mushroomy time. Let me know in the comments below, are you a mushroom fan? Do you have a favorite mushroom recipe? Have you read any of these books? Let me know all your thoughts down below, and if you've made it this far and you don't have anything to comment, leave me a mushroom emoji. If you could hit that like button below, I would surely appreciate it, and subscribe if you're interested in more of my themed vlogs, more of my culinary book tie-ins, more of my bookish content in general. But for now, I'll go ahead and leave you here and see you real soon in a new video.